Hare Krishna. We are extremely honored and happy that we have with us His Grace Parth Prabhu and Her Grace Uttama Mataji. Here. Both of them are Srila Prabhupada disciples. They are currently staying in Sharanagati Dham in Canada. So they got married in 1971 and they got initiation from Srila Prabhupada in 1973. So for more than 50 years, both of them have been practicing and helping others to practice Krishna consciousness. Prabhu was head pujari for Vancouver Temple in Canada for more than 2 decades. After that, since 2004, seeing the great need of having wonderful, happy Krishna conscious families, he got involved with Grahastha Vision team, which helps devotees and those who want to get married or those who are married by counseling and other things. He, along with his wife, both of them have been doing many wonderful courses and seminars and workshops for training devotees in Grahastha life. They have done these courses in America, Canada, Europe, Africa, South Africa, India, China, Russia, Middle East, many places around the world. They are, along with the team of Grahastha Vision team, they have also produced very beautiful devotional manual or devotional guidebook, Heart and Soul Connections, a devotional guide for marriage, service, and love. Their motto is happy, healthy families, healthy marriages, happy families, and strong ISKCON. So we are very honored that they had come to India. So we requested them they can come and spend some time and help and guide our devotees here in Calcutta, Newtown. So we are very honored that they are here with us for a couple of days. So on Saturday, Sunday, they will be doing one course called Strengthening Bond That Free Us. Now that is a paradox. No? Strength bonds little bind, but this is a divine family bond. If is there, they can free us from this samsara, and we can be happy. How to be happy here, and how to make our future also bright. So they will be helping us with this through this course. So let us welcome His Grace Parth Prabhu and Uttama Mataji to Shri Shri Nitai Gaurang Temple by loudly chanting 3 times. Haribo! Haribo!
Thank you. And we're feeling very honored to be here and to see your wonderful temple and very, very beautiful deities. And as someone who's been a head pujari for 20 years, I'm well aware of what goes on behind the curtains. There's so much seva that goes on around the deities, sewing, cooking, cleaning, scheduling things. Tremendous amount of seva, hundreds of hours every week. And also in maintaining the temple, I'm sure all of you are doing seva in the temple and selling books and supporting the temple. And the temple managers are dealing with all the problems no one else wants to deal with. And the sum total of all that seva and service, the Sri Sri Nitai Gauranga, when you walk in the temple, you feel that. That the whole temple is permeated with bhakti. It's very beautiful. Thank you all for your seva to Srila Prabhupada's mission and Sri Sri Nitai Gauranga. So Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are reading Canto 10, Chapter 60, Text 40. Jadyam Vajastava Gada Grajayas Tutubhupan. Vidravya Sangha Ninadena Jaharta Mamtam. Simho yatas babalemisha pashun sabagam. Tebyo bayad yad udahim sharanam prapanna. Jadyam vachas tavagada grajayastubupan. Vidravya shanga nidanena jahartamam tam. Simho yata svabalemisha pashun svabagam. Tebyo bayad yad udadhim sharanam prapanna. Next, please. Yam vachas. Yam vachasta vakata jayastabupan. Which am I like to chant? Yam vachasta vakata jayastabupan. Vidravya shanga nidanena dahatamam tam. Simho yatas valalemisha pasham sabagam. Devyo bayad yad vritim saranam prapanna. Vyadyam. Foolishness. Vacha. Words. Tava. Your. Gada graja. Ogadad graja. Ya. Who. To. Even. Upan. Kings. Vidravya. Driving away. Shanga. Of Shanga. Your bow. Ninadena. By the resounding. Jaharta. Took away. Mam. Me. Tvam. You. Simha. A lion. Yata. As. Sva. Your own. Balim. Tribute. Isha. O Lord. Pashum. Animals. Svabhagam. His own share. Tebya. Of them. Bayat. Out of fear. Yat. That. Udadhim. Of the ocean. Saranam prapana. Took shelter. Translation and purport by the servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. My Lord, as a lion drives away lesser animals to claim his proper tribute, you drove off the assembled kings with a resounding twang of your Shanga bow, and then claimed me, your fair share. Thus it is sheer foolishness, my dear Gaura, for you to say you took shelter in the ocean of fear of those kings. Please repeat. My Lord, as a lion drives away lesser animals to claim his proper tribute, you drove off the assembled kings with the resounding twang of your Shanga bow, and then claimed me, your fair share. Thus it is sheer foolishness, my dear Gaura, for you to say you took shelter in the ocean of fear of those kings. Purport. In text 12 of this chapter, Lord Krishna said, Rajo Viyata Subhu Samudram Sharanam Gatam. Terrified of those kings, we went to the ocean for shelter. According to the Acharyas, Lord Krishna finally provoked Rukmini's anger by glorifying other men who might have been her husband. And thus, in an agitated mood, she tells him that she is not ignorant, but rather that he has spoken foolishly. She states, like a lion, you abducted me in the presence of those kings and drove them away with your Shanga bow. So it is simply foolishness to say that out of fear of those same kings you went to the ocean. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, as Queen Rukmini spoke these words, she frowned and cast angry, sidelong glances at the Lord. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvashesha Sunyavadi Pasachadesha Tarane Omaganathimarandasha Janan Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langa Yategirim Yat Kripatam Aham Bande Shigurum Dinataranam. So you were mentioning paradoxes. I'd like to talk about a little bit of a paradox in our philosophy here. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vita raga bhaya krodha man mayamam upashrita bahavo jnana tapasa putamad bhavan agata. That being free from attachment, fear, and anger, many great persons in the past became purified by knowledge of Krishna and attained transcendental love for him. So Krishna in Bhagavad Gita is saying how we have to become free from anger. And here we see Rukmini is becoming angry at Krishna. So there's some kind of a paradox, well, apparent contradiction. So I'd like to explore with you a bit about anger and a bit about emotions and the nature of our mind. So the pastimes of Krishna are on the platform of Shuddha Sattva, pure, unalloyed goodness. In the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada describes how, in order for us to attain Krishna, who was on the platform of Shuddha Sattva, we also have to come to the platform of Shuddha Sattva, that platform of pure goodness, to be able to enter into the pastimes of Krishna. And so that's not an easy task, to come to the platform of Shuddha Sattva. But that is actually the goal of our practice of sadhana bhakti, of anartha nivriti, to become free from all these subtle influences of the modes of material nature so we can come to the mode of pure, unadulterated goodness. So that anger that's being exhibited in the transcendental realm of Shuddha Sattva, it's nothing like material anger, nothing like material anger. For this, we see in this purport that Krishna, he was actually trying to provoke some anger in Rukmini. He wanted to see her a little angry. That was actually his desire. And it's described that Krishna, he enjoys the rebukes of his queens more than hearing Vedic mantras being recited by great Brahmana sages. Krishna enjoys that more. So that's inconceivable. Because if we understand, especially in deity worship, I worshiped Radha Krishna deities in the Vancouver temple for 20 years, and Srila Prabhupada gave this instruction that we worship Radha Krishna in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan with great awe and reverence. And by having that mood of great awe and reverence towards Radha Krishna, that enables us to come more to the goodness. It enables us to become very aware that we should not commit offenses and become casual in the worship of Radha Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, he once said, even if you worship the deity, if you do not read my books, your activities can become material. So even you can be serving the deity directly, and if you don't get a continual, regular dosage of Shravana, hearing Srila Prabhupada's books, how to progress in Krishna consciousness, there's a danger that your consciousness can become a little material. So it's very important in our neophyte stage that we have to develop that great stage, that great mood of awe and reverence and respect, understanding that, especially Radha Krishna. Krishna is the supreme, absolute personality of God, the controller of all the planets and the demigods, that everything within the creation is the energy of the Supreme Lord. Earth, air, fire, water, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. Those are Krishna's energies. Srila Prabhupada was lecturing on that verse once on 26 2nd Avenue, and he said, "You're not sitting on the floor." He said, "You are sitting on Krishna. You are sitting on Krishna's energy. You're sitting on Krishna's energy." So that is our Lord Krishna. That is who we're actually worshiping. Lord Krishna, the supreme, absolute personality of Godhead, controller of everything. But somehow on the highest transcendental platform, the stage of absolute and total perfection, that knowledge becomes transcendentally covered. It becomes apparently lost. And Krishna's unalloyed pure devotees, sometimes they'll even chastise Krishna. Chastise Krishna, and Krishna enjoys that. So that's a paradox. So it's very important for us as aspiring Vaishnavas to understand what is Shuddha Sattva and what is the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. To understand those modes so we can elevate ourselves to the highest platform. So I'm sure everyone here, including myself, sometimes we experience anger. Is anyone here free from anger? Right. We've all experienced that. And so what does it feel like when you become angry? Prabhupada refers to this in one purport as the something called the Rudra principle. And Prabhupada describes how when you become angry in the modes of material nature, this Rudra principle takes over, and Prabhupada describes how your fists will clench, your chest will become tight, your breathing might become shallow, and you become very hot-headed. Does anyone experience that? So we experience that. And when you experience that kind of anger, it just literally pollutes your body. It's very hard to get out of your consciousness. Your body becomes literally infected with this Rudra principle. However, you can see for a pure devotee of the Lord, his anger or her anger is something very different. And Prabhupada described how sometimes the Acharya, one moment he can be as hard as a thunderbolt, and the next moment soft as a rose. Satsuru Maharaj, one time he was describing how he dictated a letter to Srila Prabhupada, for Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada dictated that to please, there was some note in the letter that was dictated, to please see the enclosure. So that means there's supposed to be something enclosed in the envelope. Satsuma Maharaj, he wrote the letter, typed it out, put it in the mail, and then he realized he did not put the enclosure in the envelope. And he went to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm really sorry I didn't put the enclosure in the envelope. And he said, Srila Prabhupada got really very, very angry at him. And then Satsuma Maharaj said, he started to make excuses. Well, I was really tired or something, and my mind just forgot. Prabhupada got even more angry. And he made 3 or 4 excuses, and each time Prabhupada would get a little more angry. And then finally, he said, well, Srila Prabhupada, I'll write a second letter apologizing and saying that I forgot to put the enclosure and it's now enclosed. And he said Prabhupada's anger just immediately disappeared. Immediately, poof, it was gone. So, so for a pure devotee, that anger, it's like the example of the cobra sometimes it won't bite, but it will put up its hood just to let you know to be careful. So the pure devotee's anger is like that. It's just an exhibition for our instruction, or in Krishna's pastime, it's something to increase the exchanges between Krishna's devotees. In Mayapur, one devotee asked a question in one of the classes: why are there arguments between devotees? Why are there arguments between devotees? So why this? We would think, especially when you first come to Krishna consciousness, at least my experience was, having been infected by impersonal philosophy, the first day we moved in the temple in Vancouver, Canada, I just thought, okay, everyone's just going to be some kind of homogeneous, peaceful, Om Shanti, oneness kind of everyone was so different. Everyone was just completely, it was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener. I was shocked. People were so, actually, if we all look at ourselves, we're all a little strange because we're very unique spirit souls. The first day in the temple, we had one very eccentric godbrother. Actually, the first morning after moving into the temple, I went downstairs, and then one of my godbrothers, Brahmachari, he was downstairs, sitting on the floor, a plate of prasadam on the floor, had his hands behind his back, leaning over with his face, eating the prasadam. And I remember thinking, this is weird, but I'm not going to ask about this. This place there's something special here. I'm not going to bother asking about that. So devotees come in all stripes and colors. Just like we see in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates, there's a whole spectrum of personalities. You have someone like Pundarik Vijayanidhi, who from external point of view seemed like a very materialistic personality. He had this room with like bed with silk canopies and big pillows and opulence, and he seemed like a sense enjoyer. But he was actually extremely advanced Vaishnava. And then you have an example of Raghunath Das Goswami, who was on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. He was so renounced, he became so renounced, it's described that he was eating the remnants from the free food distribution booths in Jagannath Puri that no one would take, and ended up being put in the side of the road for the cows to eat. And some of that even the cows would not take, he would take that. He would take that. So that's quite a spectrum of differences. So Raghunath Das Goswami, Lord Chaitanya once, he took some of those remnants forcibly from Raghunath Das Goswami, and he said of all the varieties of Jagannath Mahaprasad I have tasted, this was the best. Inconceivable. And also Pundarik Vijayanidhi, a pure devotee, was very dear to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we all have different characteristics, different natures, and sometimes we have collisions. sometimes those differences collide and it creates friction. And differences of opinion, difference in styles. Just like Acharya Ratna was telling me how there was this discussion, well, where are Radha Govinda, are they going to come here or are they going to stay in their existing temple? And he said there was a big debate about that, and there was some very strong, very strong opinions, And it was so difficult to talk about, they decided to just file it for a while. So sometimes we experience those kinds of collisions of differences. We experience that, especially, I think most of you are probably living in ashram, maybe some of you are grahastas, and when you're living in close contact with others, there's always going to be those kinds of collisions of differences. And sometimes those collisions of differences, maybe they make us annoyed, maybe they make us frustrated, maybe sometimes they make us angry. So why would Krishna put us in that situation? Why would it should just be Om Shanti, right? And we're praying in the Shikshashtaka how by we want to develop these qualities of humility, tolerance, and patience in order to constantly be able to chant the holy name of the Lord. So where are those qualities going to come from? Is Krishna just one day going to magically turn a little switch on and all of a sudden we'll be completely transcendental, aloof from all the disturbances of the material world? That could happen. You could get some special mercy. But my practical experience after being a devotee for 50 years is that Krishna arranges situations where we can become a little humble and tolerant and patient. One of our god sisters, quite a few years ago, she told us she went to Navadvip Mandal Parikrama with this ladies group. And everywhere she went to the different sacred places, she was praying, please let me develop, humility, tolerance, and patience. That was her prayer. And she said the next day, a new lady came into her party that she was traveling with. And she said this person was the most annoying person that she'd ever met. Was very bossy and like pushy. And so my god sister said, she was thinking, Krishna, why is this happening? I come all the way to Mayapur to go on Navadvip Parikrama, and this is happening. I don't understand why this is happening. And she said, then she all of a sudden she realized, I was praying for this. I was praying for this. I was praying. So Krishna arranged a situation where you can practice. So it's important for us to remember that Krishna is arranging situations for us to practically apply the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And so especially this aspect of anger. And we understand how in Kali Yuga, it's described in the Bhagavatam, how men are very lazy, unfortunate, misguided. And Srila Prabhupada describes in the purport to that verse how in this age men's finer sentiments are lost. We lose our finer sentiments. And what happens when we lose our finer sentiments? So when we lose our finer sentiments, we tend to end up with very gross sentiments. It's very interesting in linguistic study. They've noted that over the last 100 years, especially, the vocabulary and the number of words that are used to express emotions has very much decreased. Very much decreased. And you see how, especially in the current age, generally the emotions have boiled down to lust, anger, and greed are the go-to emotions for people. And that can be very problematic when we lose touch with those finer sentiments, with those finer emotions. Because just like sometimes we may be disturbed, maybe you got some special Nitai Gauranga Mahaprasad that was given to you by the head Pujari, and you just put it someplace to hide it so you could honor it later on. And then one other devotee finds your prasadam. And Prabhupada actually said that you can take Mahaprasadam without permission. And so someone comes in, they steal your Mahaprasadam. And maybe you get like really angry at them. You just blow up. And so why? Why do we blow up? Why do we go to those gross emotions? And so in the process of bhakti, it's very important that we be introspective, very introspective. Because sometimes we may think, okay, I'm angry. So-and-so stole my Maha. But are we really angry? Just like Lakshman used his anger against Sarpanaka, Hanuman used his anger against Ravana and all the soldiers, Bhima used his anger against the Kauravas. So my godbrother or my friend that stole my Maha, is he on the level of Ravana or Hiranyakasipu? Probably not. So maybe anger isn't really warranted in that situation, not that kind of anger. So there's maybe little more subtle emotions. Maybe I'm disappointed. Maybe I'm frustrated. Maybe I'm frustrated and hungry that he took my Maha, which made it more frustrating. But frustration is different than anger. And we can express our frustration in a more constructive way than generally anger, because when we become angry, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, anger, actually Swami Manu tells Dhruva Maharaj, when Dhruva Maharaj was annihilating all the yakshas, he said, you should control your anger, because anger is the foremost enemy on the path of self-realization. Anger is the enemy on the path of self-realization. So why is anger, that material anger influenced by passion and ignorance, why is that our enemy? It's our enemy because when we go to that Rudra principle, and actually what happens when that Rudra principle kicks in, why does your chest feel tight? Because all your energy is going to your internal organs. And it's something called the fight, flight, or freeze mode. And in that mode, you need energy. If you have to fight, your energy is in your muscles. It's in your inner core. If you have to flee, you have energy to, if the building's on fire, you have energy to run out. So in those circumstances, that principle can serve you well. However, if it's some situation where I've misread my emotions and I've over-exaggerated the circumstance, and I'm thinking I'm very angry because my godbrother did this or that, or my friend did this or that, and we have this Rudra principle kicking in, our higher intelligence becomes disconnected. And what happens when our intelligence is disconnected, that's when we commit Vaishnava aparadh. When we criticize or blaspheme, become very angry, say very harsh, cruel, critical words, that is very detrimental to our spiritual life. So anger, it's very important that it be controlled. And so again, the anger is like the emotions in the material world. I don't know about India, but there's a phenomenon now, maybe the last 5-10 years, especially among young people, to describe emotions. Like something is really nice, something is very exciting, they'll use a word like, oh, that's really wicked. Do they say that in India, things like that? That's what's going on in North America. Kids will say, oh, that's wicked. That's really sick. But what they mean, it was like really fun or really nice. So why are they going to these descriptions, words that would describe a very gross emotion to something that's nice? It's just complete perversion of language, and it's very counterproductive. And also in terms of our own linguistics, especially in English and many languages, the way we express emotion, sometimes it's actually very counterproductive, and it is actually very conducive to material conditioning. So I might say, I am angry, or I am hungry, but am I angry? I'm actually a spirit soul. I'm actually a spirit soul. Am I hungry? No, I'm not hungry. I am a spirit soul. And in Old English, hundreds of years ago, they would say something like, "Oh, hunger has come upon me." Not that I'm hungry, not that I am hungry. This emotion of hunger has come upon me because my body is low on fuel. Very different way of looking at those kind of emotions. So emotions, the purpose of an emotion is to give us direction. And we want to take the direction that those emotions are trying to give us to move in the direction towards Krishna. So when something seemingly adverse happens and I'm becoming angry, is that really the direction I want to go with this emotion? Do I want to become angry at my god brother, god sister? Do I want to get mad? Do I want to argue with them? Do I want to threaten them? Probably not. Probably not. And when we're in that Rudra principles infecting us, we go to our gross emotions, we react in those ways, we're falling into that conditioned mentality. And so by understanding that, actually, somehow Krishna has put me in a situation so I can experience this emotion to help me develop patience and tolerance. And is that easy? No. Is it easy philosophically? We can understand that. In the heat of the moment, can we do that always? No. But we can practice. We can practice developing that. And we can also pray to the Lord to help us to be able to do that. The Prachetas were instructed to go and perform austerities, to become purified, to be able to properly execute their duties of ruling the world. And just as they were leaving to do that, they encountered Lord Shiva, and he gave them a very wonderful instruction in the form of this song. It's called the Song of Lord Shiva. You can read this in the Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chanting the song of Lord Shiva. Very beautiful prayers. And in that prayers, he's glorifying Krishna, the personality of Godhead, his beauty, how his body glistens like rainfall. He has the Kaustubha gem, the Srivatsa mark. His abdomen is so beautiful. His navel is so beautiful. It looks like the entire universe wants to enter in. And he's praying to the Lord in the form of Aniruddha. And it's very interesting. In the purport, Prabhupada gives some lengthy description of how the sun god, Surya, is an expansion of Aniruddha. And Prabhupada mentions how all the power and energy in this world, we are deriving that from the sun, from Surya, the incarnation of Krishna in the sun. So just like we have electricity, that's being either generated by fossil fuel, which is generated from a transformation of the sun's energy, or hydroelectricity, which is generated by the power of the sun, evaporating rain, depositing it somewhere else through generation of power. We're completely dependent upon the sun for growing our food. We're dependent upon the sun for this. So you can imagine all the energy, not just on this planet, but the entire creation is coming from Surya Narayan. Krishna is so powerful that he's generating all that energy. And so that Supreme Lord, Lord Shiva, is praying to him as Aniruddha, and he's praying that, my dear Lord, please help my mind be fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna. You, the all-powerful Lord, who's controlling this entire creation, producing all this energy in this world, please help me fix my mind and control it so I can think of the lotus feet of Krishna. So Lord Shiva, he's the head of the Rudra Sampradaya. He's praying that. He's the Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, the greatest of Vaishnavas. He's praying, my dear Lord Aniruddha, please help me control my mind. And he describes how he got this prayer from Lord Brahma. And it's described by Srila Prabhupada and by Lord Shiva, how Brahma, he chanted this prayer in the beginning of the creation so he could execute his duty. And also all the great sages and progenitors who were beginning the creation, they were also chanting these mantras to enable them to fix their minds upon Krishna so they could properly execute their duties. So it's very important for us to realize, as Arjuna said to Krishna, asam sayam mahabaho mano dinigraham chalam abhyasena tukuntaya vairagena chagriyate. That he said, my dear Lord, that system of yoga that you have summarized, it seems impractical, unendurable, for the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very difficult to control. Very difficult to control. And Krishna agreed that yes, it is very difficult. But Krishna says, it is difficult, but it is possible by constant practice and detachment. And so that practice Srila Prabhupada described is the different processes of devotional service. And he said specifically the process of hearing. He said that is the most important process for controlling the mind is actually the process of hearing. And he described how by hearing about Krishna, one's mind becomes attracted to Krishna. And the more one's mind becomes attracted to Krishna, the more the mind becomes detached from those things that are drawing us away from Krishna. So hearing is a very powerful, essential process to help us control our mind, to be able to control that kind of anger. And again, it's as Swami Bhuvamanu was telling Dhruva, that it's the foremost enemy on the path of self-realization. And that's a very interesting pastime, because first he says, Dhruva, he says, stop. You have to stop this. But he doesn't just say stop. He says stop, and then he actually glorifies the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He spends several verses glorifying the dynasty of Dhruva Maharaj and the great responsibility he has as a king. That's maybe like 15 verses where after he says, you need to stop, he says some glorification of Krishna. And then he tells Dhruva that anger is the foremost enemy. In self-realization, you should control your anger. And then Dhruva stopped. And that's interesting because, again, it's difficult to get out of that mode of anger. And actually, physiologically, what happens when you're subjected to that Rudra principle, your body is actually flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, which completely clouds your thinking. And it actually takes some time to cool down. And so it's interesting that Swami Bhuvamanu, he kind of gave Dhruva a little period to decompress. And if you ever find yourself becoming angry in that way, so just step back for a minute and cool off. I'm just like most of you, many devotees here are probably into IT, and if you have a problem with your computer, sometimes you have to reboot it, and it resets. And similarly, when you become angry, if you can step back, chant Hare Krishna, do some kirtan, go for a walk, you can reboot your higher intelligence and connect, not just with our higher material intelligence, but with the Lord in the heart, because real intelligence comes from within the heart. And what happens if we enter that Rudra principle of anger, we become flooded with anger, we start thinking bad things or saying bad things towards other people, we commit Vaishnava aparat, and that's going to disconnect us from the Lord in the heart, who's actually trying to give us good instruction in those circumstances. So very, very important for our spiritual life to understand that anger is something we want to avoid. So I'm just going to stop there, and if anyone has any questions or comments, we'll take questions for a few minutes.
Hare Krishna. If anybody question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I have two questions. I'll ask the first one. Prabhupada sometimes mentions, you're, in the context of your speaking, that every devotee is unique. Everybody has their own way of connecting to Krishna, and they themselves are unique. And at the same time, Prabhupada sometimes uses this word called military training. Military training.
Military training. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he uses in the, that also an aspect of a devotee. Their devotees are systematically should be trained. In that way, also Prabhupada writes some purports. If you could share, how do we relate that here?
The military training. So again, that's so there's many contradictions, what apparent contradictions we see in the instructions of the Acharyas. So Srila Prabhupada has said that devotional service is voluntary. And he's also said it's like military. So that's contradiction. So how to resolve those contradictions? My favorite contradiction, the one purport Srila Prabhupada said, after the age of 50, every man should take sannyas. In another purport, he said, in Kali Yuga, no one should take sannyas. Those two statements are in the same canto, same chapter, same verse, same paragraph. And Srila Prabhupada, he qualifies that by saying that if one has the necessary qualifications, then he should take sannyas. So is it military, or is it voluntary? Yes, yes. And so how to apply that? And I've come to realize very important point very early in the Bhagavatam that we need to understand is from the second verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which describes how the knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. So those different kinds of instructions, we can't, well, in North America, especially Canada, we have this beautiful fruit called a cherry. And sometimes we might sort of take certain things out of Prabhupada's books just for my own purpose, or maybe I'm taking things out of Prabhupada's purport so I can find fault in you, so I can feel more advanced because I can find fault in you. That's called cherry picking. I'm not using the knowledge for the welfare of all. I'm using it for my own aggrandizement or for my own motive. So we have to see the exact context of the situation where we're going to apply that knowledge. And it's going to be difficult in different circumstances. Just like Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he got sent to China. He did not want to go. Because I don't know if you know the story. Prabhupada chastised him for something, and Tamal Krishna said, "What do you want me to do, Prabhupada, go to China?" And he left the room, and the next morning in Mangal Arati, Prabhupada sent his servant to go bring Tamal Krishna Maharaj to see him in Prabhupada's room. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said the first thing he said when he went to Prabhupada's room is, "I'm not going." But Prabhupada said, "Krishna spoke through you." And he went, and you cannot imagine the amazing things that are happening in China now. There's amazing things happening there from that. So the Acharya, he knows how to apply those things according to time and circumstance. So that's why those statements there. Someone asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur once, why are these contradictions there in the Shastra, in the words of the Acharyas? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur replied, from the materialistic vision, they appear as contradictions, but on the liberated platform, there is no contradiction. So we see how Prabhupada, he used those things according to time and circumstance to help devotees advance in those specific circumstances. And there's something very, I don't think I can ever understand the rest of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's reply, but he said those those apparent contradictions are in the Shastras, he said, to protect the Shastras, how did he say, from the prying eyes of the demons. The prying eyes of the demons. So what I took from that, if I develop a demoniac mentality, and I might pry into Srila Prabhupada's books, trying to find some statement for my own aggrandizement to control and manipulate others. And so how can that protect the Shastra? That will protect the Shastra, because if I start doing that, develop that wrong mentality in applying Srila Prabhupada's books, I can be cut off from Krishna's mercy. And that's a very dangerous position to be in. So those statements are there, and again, it's how to apply those statements according to time and circumstance. So, and it's different, very different in all circumstances. And Srila Prabhupada, he's the Acharya at that, and somehow, especially when we become managers, it's very important that we learn to do that, and according to time and circumstance. Uttamai, something? Might have to speak a little louder, or they're going to give you a microphone.
Referring to that Bhagavad Gita purport where Srila Prabhupada said we should perform devotional services as if in a military discipline. And I always took that to mean that we just need to be determined, fixed, regulated, doing our sadhana in a very fixed way. Not that we all have to become one and homogeneous, like, soldiers but just that our devotional service needs to be that fixed and regulated. We had another question, I think.
Thank you, Robi. One more question I have is, I forgot the question. If I remember.
Thank you, Prabhu, for this class. Prabhu, you were mentioning about how they are.
I think it's on.
Prabhu, like you were speaking about different emotions and the subtlety of these emotions. So, generally, in the beginning of spiritual life, we see emotions as an impediment to our progress.
You're saying in the beginning we see emotions can be an impediment?
Or, yeah, emotions. Impediment to our spiritual progress, like toward anyone. So it is more kind of an impersonal view, because in spiritual world there are emotions between different living entities and between Krishna. And so my question is that how do we actually try to like even Srila Prabhupada write in many purport that how the relationship between man and woman and those emotions are like the influence of Maya, and even our nationalism. These are emotions, but these are impediments offered by Maya. Nationalism, society, friendship, love. So, how do we actually make sure that our emotions are real emotions for other living entities, and we don't get entangled by?
So again, that's important to how you want to see the whole context of Srila Prabhupada's instructions. So society, friendship, and love can be Maya. In the material world, it's Maya. Society, friendship, and love in the spiritual world, that's the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada described how all these emotions that we experience, even anger, frustration, affection for others, Prabhupada said that those emotions cannot be abnegated. You cannot negate those emotions. And Prabhupada, he specifically referred to affection in one purport as a symptom of life. And so that's a symptom of life. I have a pulse in my body, and if I started turning blue and you came and you didn't feel any pulse, you know that I'm on the way out or gone. So similarly, if we don't have affectionate relationships amongst the Vaishnavas, our association, our God brothers, or our families, if there's no affection there, our lives can become dry, and our pulse can weaken in our spiritual life. So it's very important that we do have those kind of caring relationships. Now they started this initiative called devotee care, and who was it at the ILS? I can't remember. They boiled it down to the essence. Devotee care means you care about the devotees. You care about them. You're concerned. You actually, you're concerned about them. So we want to use those emotions again to care for others and to serve them. Whereas in the materialistic realm, I may say, oh, I love pizza. Can you love pizza? Or I mean, so what I'm really underneath is I'm gratified by eating pizza. I get some gratifications. I can't love pizza. I can't really serve pizza. I can serve pizza to the devotees, maybe. That's loving exchange. So it's finding the real use of those emotions, because Srila Prabhupada once described the only difference between the eternal spiritual realm and the material realm. He said the material realm is that portion of the Lord's creation where his all-pervasiveness is not perceived. So if I'm not seeing that, everything around me is Krishna's energy. All of you are spirit souls, very dear to Srila Prabhupada. If I don't see that, I can start to see in a little different way. My emotions might become judgmental, or thinking, how can I take advantage of you or exploit you? And my emotions can take me in the wrong direction. But if I'm having the proper vision, how you're all very dear to Srila Prabhupada, and my duty as a servant of Srila Prabhupada is to somehow serve and help you. So my emotions of care can be utilized in that way. So it's not to destroy the emotions, but to utilize them properly. And destroying or trying to abnegate or subdue emotions rather than spiritualize them can cause actually mental health problems. In Canada, there was a 10-year period where they noticed that the suicide rate among men had increased 4 times higher than women. And they were trying to understand, well, what happened in the last 10 years? And they discovered that what was happening is that there's a phenomena called toxic masculinity, where men, actually it's a very cultural phenomenon all over the world, that men are taught to be tough, just suck it up, boys don't cry, just suppress your emotions, just go on and do it. But what happens when you suppress emotions, it creates a lot of internal tension. And what was happening with this men, sometimes they're just internalizing all this stress and this emotion. They have no way to express it. And eventually they would just commit suicide, which is tragic. And so Rupa Goswami, he's given us these 2 loving exchanges of revealing our mind and heart in confidence and hearing in confidence. And Srila Prabhupada described that once as that if I'm troubled by something, I'll reveal my mind to you and you will listen to me and understand me. And what happens when we have that kind of a venue with someone we trust and someone we can confide in what we're actually feeling and experiencing, it helps us to process that emotion, and then you can move on with it. And again, that is an extremely important spiritual process that Rupa Goswami has recommended. Loving exchange and devotional service, that's actually as essential as taking prasadam. Take prasadam almost 1,000 times a year. How many times in a year have we actually gone to if you're married, your spouse or your close friend of yours, and said, Prabhu, I'm just really troubled by this. Can you just listen to me and hear me out? How often do we do that? Probably we need to do that a lot more in our spiritual lives, because those 6 things are very important for our spiritual progress. And also in terms of being able to understand and process emotions, if we are unable to understand and process our own emotions, the things we're experiencing in our daily lives even, how will it be possible for us to actually enter into and understand all these subtle emotions that are described in Srimad Bhagavatam between Krishna and his devotees? Nectar Devotion, the summary study of devotional service, it's just paints this amazing spectrum of all these devotional, emotional experiences. So how will we actually enter into that and understand that if we can't actually process and understand our own emotions? So again, emotions, they don't have to be suppressed. We have to find out the spiritual purpose behind them, because that will help us progress in our spiritual life. There's a question here.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji, for wonderful class. So my question is, I'm asking my question. You told purpose of emotion is to give direction. I'm asking my question through one example. We chant Hare Krishna, and sometimes it's a very bad chanting.
Chant Hare Krishna is challenging.
Yeah, it's very bad chanting. We are not chanting attentively. Time is lost, or we may feel sleepy.
So you're feeling tired. Maybe you're feeling frustrated that you can't chant attentively.
Yeah.
That kind of
So
thing?
that is my question. So we feel bad or very bad or sometimes frustrated as well. So my question is it good or is it okay?
You're feeling what you're feeling.
I'm asking feeling of frustrated or very bad. Is it?
Well, again, it's like the emotion is trying to tell you something. So you're feeling that. It's a bit like the gauge in the car. You have a gauge in the car, the petrol gauge. And when it goes down, it gets a certain point, and you're going to stop and put more petrol in. So if I feel that kind of inattentiveness, that frustration, I just feel so tired, that means that gauge is trying to tell us something. It's trying to, maybe it's telling us, maybe you just need to stand up for a few minutes. Maybe it's telling us you need to refocus. Maybe it's telling us you need to realize that the holy name it's something extremely sacred. You've just been handed something by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the greatest possible gift imaginable, the holy name, which contains everything. And we forget that. We forget that sometimes. So Srila Prabhupada gave an amazing lecture, Radha Damodar Temple, on the nectar devotion. And he was describing how the holy name is such a sacred thing, and Krishna has given this to us, and we should chant so attentively. And we just forget. We forget what we have, and we can fall into the tiredness. But again, that emotion, that tiredness, it's trying to tell us, okay, I need to refocus. I need to refocus. Maybe we can say the prayer by Lord Shiva. My dear Aniruddha, please help me make my mind clear so I can chant the holy name. We can pray. So it's trying to tell you something. The emotions are trying to, you don't have to fight the emotion. It's real. You're feeling it. What is it trying to tell me? Anything else? Spark burner?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for the class, Prabhuji. So you were talking about anger, Prabhuji. So in an adverse situation, when anger comes, it's very difficult to control because mind is very difficult to control. So you mentioned that Krishna says that it is possible by practice and detachment. So what I understood that in practice you mentioned that there is hearing like that. But can you elaborate a little more on in this context, what is the practice in controlling anger and what is detachment in that?
The practice is that somehow I should see that Krishna has put me in the situation for some purpose. Prabhupada, one of his often quoted verses, Tatenu kampam shushamik shamano bunjana evat vakritam vapagam hridvag vapurbir vididams namaste. Jivetayo mukti pade sadayabhak. So that verse describes the attitude of a pure devotee. If he finds himself in an adverse situation, a disturbing situation, a frustrating situation, a situation that could provoke anger, his vision is that somehow Krishna has put me in this situation, and actually, due to my previous life's sinful activities, it should be so much worse. But Krishna, he's minimized it to nil. Thank you, Krishna, you minimized it. And if he's in a favorable situation, he thinks, I'm not actually worthy of this, but Krishna is giving me some favorable situation so I can serve him better. And he's thankful to Krishna. So in all circumstances, a pure devotee has that vision that somehow Krishna's arranged that. Krishna's put me in that situation. And again, that's the problem when we let our emotions go to that gross anger, it's very easy to lose sight of that transcendental vision, which is again why Swami Bhuvamananda was telling Dhruva, it's the foremost enemy on this path of self-realization. So we want to catch our emotions before they go to that anger. Sometimes I may be frustrated with the God brother in ashram, and I never say anything, I never express myself to him. And then it just builds up, and all of a sudden I become angry and I blow up. Whereas I could have just said maybe, Prabhu, when you kind of steal the Mahaprasadam that I stashed, it's a little frustrating for me because I took it as Krishna's mercy. I didn't blame him. I didn't say I was angry with him, but I just shared, Prabhu, the Pujari gave me that, and I took it as a special blessing, and I'm disappointed when you took it that I wasn't able to honor that special blessing. And so that can enable the other person to understand. Because sometimes we become angry at the other person, then they just become defensive, and instead of having a dialogue about what was going on there, maybe he understood. Prabhupada did say you can take Mahaprasad without permission. He took that as Prabhupada's blessing to steal Maha. We have a discussion about that. But when we go to anger, instead of having a constructive dialogue, we end up having debates. And debate never really solves things. We tend to become critical, and so it's to see how things are Krishna's mercy and how to deal with those kind of emotions before they become a problem. Does that answer the question? Okay. Detachment again is I'm realizing I'm not the controller, Krishna's controlling this. Krishna's in charge, and he's put me in the situation. Because when we think we're the controller of the situation, that's problematic because we're not the controller. So we can become detached by seeing, step back, take a deep breath, and see somehow Krishna is doing this. Anything else?
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Prabhuji, you were mentioning about how emotions are giving us a direction. So we introspect and then deal with them in a spiritual way. And we also are hearing about Krishna giving us a direction to become more humble, tolerant, and patient. Just wanted to ask tolerance, when we talk of sometimes when things happen, it's also a quality that we should cultivate to tolerate the situation. So how do we dealing the emotion and also about being tolerant in the situation? So sometimes devotees deal with it like some negative thing happens, you tolerate, but then as you mentioned, it can turn into a pent up feeling that comes out. So
in order to actually be tolerant, you actually have to have boundaries. You have to have some personal boundaries, because especially in Kali Yuga, sometimes if you're a little humble and tolerant, people will exploit your humility and tolerance to take advantage of you. And so you don't want, and sometimes that's hard to, especially if in your life you have been taken advantage of, you might be reluctant to be a little humble and tolerant because you've had a bad experience. So it's important to know that, I need to have certain boundaries. Someone might steal my moha and I can let that slide. Someone steals my passport, maybe not. I call the police. So having certain boundaries can enable us to extend that compassion and tolerance to the point where we know that, well, if I tolerate something that's maybe abusive or exploitive, that's not going to be conducive to my spiritual advancement and also to the other individual who's exploiting me. That's going to be detrimental to him also. So having kind of those personal boundaries, it's important. Take one last question in the back there.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji, for wonderful class. Talking about anger, you're talking about how anger is so detrimental for one's progress. We see from scriptures anger in two ways.
Please say again.
Anger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One way we see anger as anartha, which we have to work on. At the same time, we also see anger sometimes as a part of one's swabhava, one's very nature. For example, when we look at sages like Durvas Muni has angerness as the part of his own nature. So that can't be called as anartha, but we have to know how to deal with it. So when you find our subordinate with such an nature, having angry nature, how should we deal effectively? Or you find a superior with angry nature, how do we deal effectively so that the relationship is well balanced?
So you're asking if we do have that kind of nature, how to utilize it in Krishna service in a way that's constructive?
Yes.
Oh, well, we definitely don't want to be like Durvasa. We don't want to be like Ramachandra Puri. No. But we could be like Bhima. The 14 years the Pandavas were in exile, there's a description in the Mahabharata that every night they were sitting by a campfire. And every night Bhima, he was wringing his hands like this, just waiting. The clock's ticking. The time is gradually shortening to when I can get back at Duryodhana and his brothers. So we can't imitate that. we can't imitate, but maybe you do have that a Kshatriya nature to protect, and maybe you need to be engaged that way. Maybe you need to be the temple guard or something. So those kind of natures can be used in Krishna service. But again, it's very important because we have those examples, Ramachandra Puri, Durvasa, how that uncontrolled anger, it's very detrimental. And so if we're going to exhibit anger, we have to do it very, very carefully. And we saw Srila Prabhupada, his exhibition of anger was actually compassionate. He wanted you to understand the point. So we have to be very, very careful to do it in a way that the message we're trying to give or the instruction we're trying to give can be received. Sometimes a new devotee moves in the temple and everything they do wrong, someone's jumping on them. That don't put the book on the floor, don't put your beads on the floor, offer your businesses. And they just get bombarded by devotees who are a little frustrated or angry every time they do something wrong. So sometimes in temples they'll just have one person deal with the new devotees, so it kind of cushions the learning. So it's how to give those instructions in a way. Like Srila Prabhupada once, he was referring to helping devotees advance. He said we want to bend without breaking. Because if we exhibit anger in the wrong way, we can actually break someone's faith. And Prabhupada said that specifically about, especially in North America, in dealing with the Indian community. He said they were like very fine china. That you have to treat them very carefully, respectfully. Otherwise, sometimes you can break their faith in ISKCON. So you don't want to become angry with them because maybe they're not coming up to the standard. They're still drinking tea or whatever. You have to be patient. So again, it's like how to utilize those things for the welfare of all, and not that we just want to vent anger because it makes us feel good. And actually, when you vent anger, generally, it doesn't feel good.
I wanted to ask the aspect of how dealing should happen effectively. For example, let's say that I have angry nature.
You have
angry nature.
Angry nature. Yeah.
So how do I deal, or how should someone who is senior to me deal with me, or how should I deal with the subordinate? So I'm talking about the dealing aspect. How to deal knowing that the person has angry nature. For example, let's say that someone gets married to a girl, and girl has got angry nature. So how the husband should deal with that girl? Similarly, it could be anywhere where we have to know the art of how to deal so that it's not unnecessarily causing the damage to the relationship.
Again, everyone is a very unique individual. We've come out of very unique circumstances and situations. And how someone can have an angry nature, there can be different degrees of that anger and different reasons why one can have an angry nature. And sometimes if one does have a very angry nature, sometimes you can trace that back to some adverse experience they've had, especially as a child. Like if you had a caregiver who was always very angry with you, ridiculing you, criticizing you, chastising you, telling you weren't intelligent, always raging at you. Individuals sometimes who've grown up in that kind of atmosphere can tend to repeat that same kind of pattern. And in that kind of a situation, sometimes it can be very helpful if the individual can seek help to understand where my angry nature is coming from. And especially when you realize my angry nature is, counterproductive to, my bhakti. Sometimes if you can step back and realize what's happened to give that angry nature, you can kind of separate yourself from it and transcend it. So not that you'll never be angry, but you can use your anger in a more balanced, proper way. One thing you can do is to acknowledge that, I can see that you're very angry with me, and you could try to understand what they're feeling. I'm guessing maybe that you're angry with me because I didn't answer your question. And when you acknowledge someone's emotion, that actually helps them to de-escalate. It helps them to de-escalate. So sometimes if someone is angry at you, if you just say, "Well, Prabhu, I'm sorry, I'll do this to fix it," that won't always work because they're escalated. When I acknowledge, I can see that you're angry, and I'm guessing that you're angry because you're feeling that because maybe I did this or that and it's causing you some great concern. That shows I cared about you. If I just say I'm sorry, I'll fix it, that's like I'm being defensive. It's kind of about me. But if I can show that I see you're angry, I care about you, I'm guessing that you're angry for this reason, you're feeling. You try to understand their feeling. That can help them de-escalate and come to a point where you can have a civil dialogue about what the problem is. We teach that to grahastas. Okay. So maybe we'll end there. Thank you all for your attention. Gaura Purnima Jai.
His Grace Parth Prabhu ki jai. So Parth Prabhu and Mataji, this Saturday, Sunday are giving Grasta training seminars. Only very few seats are remaining. Okay. So in case you want to attend or you want, then they can give names to Parth Prabhu. Another Parth Prabhu. You can stand. Okay. So Parth Prabhu, Mataji, Sundari Mataji, Yamuna Sundari Mataji. So they can give names. Okay. Hare Krishna.